Lake George Battlefield Moments, a production of the Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance, preserving our area's incredible history. A weekly feature on 93.5 FM and live streaming at lakefm.com. Here's the president of the Lake George Battlefield Alliance, John Denuzzo.
Welcome, everyone. This is John Denuzzo of the Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance. I'm joined by Dan Barusch, the Director of Planning and Zoning for the town and village of Lake George. And our subject today is the Repose of the Fallen project, reinterring the remains of Continental soldiers and others at Lake George Battlefield Park. Dan, what can you tell us about the discovery of these remains, first of all?
Sure. Thanks for having me, John. And I'm excited to be on the podcast. Awesome new program that the Alliance is putting on with a partnership from Lake Radio. So I'm happy to be here. I could probably spend more time than we have today on the story of the remains and how they were found. But to try and summarize it as succinctly as I can, during an excavation for a construction site that was approved for a triplex, so a building with 3 units in it, in the village of Lake George on Cortlandt Street, which is in a known hotspot for archaeological finds, there was a finding, basically I think a little later than we had hoped, reported to the town and the village. And when we got to the site, there were clear evidence of grave shafts, right? So it wasn't the normal finds that we had had in years past where somebody was working on a water line and found something small. These were actually, defined, delineated grave shafts in a pattern and organized. And so we immediately undertook this effort to call in a state archaeologist, the historic preservation officer for New York State. Once they sort of all, accumulated on the site, it was determined that this was of historical relevance and needed to be addressed and recovered.
Okay, so that was in 2019.
February 2019.
Here we are 5 years later.
Mm-hmm.
What happened, from that time that you had to work and do all this research and ultimately get the approval from New York State to reinter them at the Battlefield Park?
Yes. So I would say within weeks after the findings, state archaeologists and many volunteers convened on the site and actually removed and recovered the remainders of what was left still in the existing earth from these burial shafts. There was, I believe, 14 shafts still partially intact. 16 months or so after that effort was a volunteer effort that took place with weekends full of sifting through the backfill. Over 100 people partook in that, and there were many, many more fragmented remains that were found in that backfill pile. Fast forward to, I would say, a year or two ago, we have an active committee that is spearheaded by the town of Lake George in partnership with many different entities, including the village and the Battlefield Park Alliance. They have been 4 or 5 years planning for the respectful reinterment of these soldiers and patriots. More recently comes the process at which we needed to obtain approval from New York State related to the location of the proposed project, which actually is within Battlefield Park.
And we're thrilled with the approval and the anticipation of this. Now, when would we expect the actual reinterment of the remains to occur?
We're expecting to start construction in the spring of 2025. And that's probably going to coincide with the hopeful grant assistance we will get from the Downtown Revitalization Initiative money. This is one of the anchor projects that's embedded within that package. Through probably the spring, we will continue construction site work into the fall, and then we'll kind of slow down a little for the winter of 25, early 26. And then in spring 26, the columbaria, the actual structures that will house forever the remains, that will occur, within months, I think, of the ceremonial event that'll take place in 2026.
Okay, and a lot of people know that we already have at Lake George Battlefield Park 4 unknown soldiers who were killed in the Battle of Lake George.
Yep.
Is this reinterment site close to where they're reinterred, and what will the site look like when it's constructed?
Yeah, it's actually a stone's throw from the 4 unknown soldiers. It is safely in between that location and the new Park Commission and Visitors Interpretive Center across the street. It's in this kind of nice flat plateau that's up on the knoll just to the south of the Four Unknown Soldiers Monument and connected to those pedestrian pathways that run through the park. So it's really going to be at a high-profile location, a perfect site in terms of connectivity and visibility. In 2026, when we're preparing to finalize everything, we're going to see one of the most beautiful heritage tourism projects to come to Lake George or probably to the country. And it's really, really going to build upon the strength that we have existing today in Lake George Battlefield Park. And I think bring enhanced notoriety to the preservation effort that we've been working on here for so long.
Oh, I agree completely. What the town and the state have done in recent years to enhance the site and also the appreciation for our heritage here has just been incredible. I've used the phrase repeatedly, probably ad nauseum, that we're a mini Gettysburg in the works. And I truly believe that, particularly you see our position between Saratoga to the south, Ticonderoga to the north. I think we're the natural in-between with our feet in both the French and Indian War and the American Revolution. You mentioned that certainly there's no surprise when there's construction, particularly in the village of Lake George, that remains are found. Now, what other remains might there be reinterred besides the 44 Continental soldiers and camp followers from 1776?
The answer is not exhaustive at this point because there are likely more remains out there in the area, either held in private possession or held in possession by any one of our partners, like the Lake George Historical Association. The most significant addition to the 44 Continental soldiers and followers is going to be the French and Indian War remains that the Fort William Henry has held for years now. And those were recently and may still be in Arizona under study, and we're planning for the shipment of them back to New York, to Lake George, and they will be part of the reinterment and will likely receive their own vessel or vestibule or columbaria within this project. And I think that only enhances the importance of this more. We're not only going to have remains from the Revolutionary War era, but we're going to have remains in there from the French and Indian War era as well. And so really tying everything together, again, enhancing the importance of it.
Well, and again, as you mentioned, the notoriety not only of what happened here during the Revolution and the French-Indian War, but the last of the Mohegans.
Yes.
I mean, we have folks who have commented to us that, this is big news. I mean, it's kind of closure for the siege of Fort William Henry, if you like. So that's all terrific. You mentioned the DRI, Downtown Revitalization Initiative, contributing funds to this, but I know that they're not going to contribute the whole amount that's needed. Right. How can people find out more about the project or contribute to it?
Any information that the public or any stakeholders or interested parties want to know about, a bulk of it is going to be on the project's website, which is www.reposeofthefallenlg.org. There's a link to that website on the town's website. It's pretty easy to find. There's QR codes and links on all of the literature we've developed to date through our fundraising effort. And of course, anybody who has deep interest or wants to know more, much more than what they can find on the website, anybody is free to reach out to me. I have talked to many people about this project and what's occurring within it over the years, and I love doing so. So I'm game to talk to anybody who's interested. But we're working on updating the website. We're working on incorporating every news story that's been out there for the past 5 years into this website, which is a plethora. And as we continue to progress through the final process of design, bidding, and construction, we're gonna continue to keep that website up to date.
Thanks, Dan. And while the Battlefield Park Visitor Center is closed for the season right now, certainly I and probably you would be more than happy to show people the site where the reinterment ultimately will take place.
I would love to. I would love to show anybody the site. We've actually given several tours to dignitaries there. A year or so ago, we met Senator Schumer there right at the project site, which was pretty awesome. He has been an incredibly valuable component to this project and helpful not only in the support of getting the approval at the state and the federal level with the Army, but suggesting that we go after some different types of funding. It was actually his idea to put this project into the DRI package. based on what time of year somebody might want to visit, the coolest connection we can offer after visiting the site is walking right across the street to the Vic and showing them the mannequin with the 1st Pennsylvania Battalion outfit on it. I mean, that right there is such an awesome live connection to the site. You see the buttons on the coat that we found in the ground on Cortlandt Street. Just a really unique experience and a great connection.
Thanks for the summary, Dan. Again, the website is reposeofthefallenlg.org for more information. Our Lake George Battlefield Alliance website is lakegeorgebattlefield.org. Again, avail yourselves of not only this podcast, but other podcasts and other programs that the Alliance has run on our YouTube channel. Thanks again, Dan.
Thanks for having me, John.
Lake George Battlefield Moments, a production of the Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance, preserving our area's incredible history. For more on this topic, check out the Lake George Battlefield Alliance podcast, a weekly feature on Lake FM 93.5 FM and live streaming at lakefm.com. For more information, go to info@lakegeorgebattlefield.org and tune in every Saturday morning for Lake George Battlefield Moments.